Go ahead and press the recording button here. And I'm sure more people will start to trickle in as we get going, but it is 11 o'clock Western, 2 p.m. Eastern, and that is the time for us to get started. Hold on one second. There we go. So nice to meet everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alex Gamoran. I'm with K2. With me on today's call, I have Bree Houston, who will be helping me with the demonstration portion of K2. And then also, you probably have gotten some communication and emails from Daniel Hitt and Ryan Heineman, who are with me on the call today. They helped put this presentation together. So we're excited to have everyone today. And the reason why we put this together is it's been a while since we've presented to the manufacturing industry. And frankly, that's probably one of our most popular industries. We've been around for 15 years, and we're looking, kind of taking an audit of all of our customers globally. Manufacturing is probably the top two. So we decided we wanted to put some messaging, some high-level messaging together around how we affect the manufacturing industry, why manufacturers come to us, what their issues are, and maybe make some value props both for some customers and people that are looking for something to drive workflow and forms creation. So let's go over today's agenda. I'm going to go over to begin 3 manufacturing stories. These are 3 customers of K2 that are manufacturers in different ways, have used K2 for different issues, and I will be going over the problem that they had, the solution that they implemented, and the results that they saw. From then, I'm actually going to switch over to what actually K2 is and what are our deliverables. So it's not just the results and making things operate better, but it's also how do you do it, who does it empower, who uses it, and what does it expand to. And so I'm going to go over that story a little bit. Once I go over that should be no more than 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to hand it over to Bree. She has a use case around materials requisition, which she'll go over a form where she's going to request some materials internally. It's going to go over some validation and making sure the stock is there and the data is there and going through some approvals. So you'll see some scenarios there. And then lastly is we'll take some Q&A at the end. So all questions, feel free to write them down in the text box. I will answer them. If anybody wants to talk either face-to-face, we'll do lunch or do a webinar after this presentation more custom to your use case, we're happy to do so. So let us know. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the first story of one of our customers, JKM Industrial Supply. So JKM came to us because when they filled out large orders, the orders would go through once they were submitted, no matter what data was inputted on there. So if I wanted to put an order in and we were out of stock on that product, the order would still go through. However, it would not get approved. It would just sit there. So the stock data wasn't matching, and it resulted in lost orders because no one even saw the request. So when they came to K2, they looked at making a K2 stock fulfillment process. Essentially what this did is it's a K2 application that when I fill out this form, as I'm typing out the data fields, it's checking an ERP. You'll see the next line down, the Sage ERP that had all their stock information. It's cross-checking that to make sure they have that in inventory and that it'll actually move it on to the next stage. And then the funny thing is they didn't even mean to really do this. It kind of expanded to K2 online purchasing. So they wanted to be able to have an online presence for their customers to come to their website, purchase products, and track orders all through K2. And that wasn't even their original mission. So the results they got from us, stock control, that was probably their main priority. A bonus was online purchasing capabilities, and another bonus, obviously, automated processes and visibility into the statuses. Those are themes you're going to hear a lot through these stories, visibility into statuses and processes and automating these processes. Story number 2, Sappi. So Sappi had a mission of they wanted to distribute data among all their employees. But there's 2 things going on with them. Number 1, employees could access highly confidential data, and they didn't know how to manage who could see what. So either I was seeing way too much or I didn't have access to it. And additionally, the second issue was they were actually out of compliance due to international standards with document management. The reason for this is all paper, and there was no audit trail. So when they signed off on certain things, it didn't tell me, yes, it had the signature. It didn't timestamp it. Didn't tell me what IP address it was. Didn't tell me the location, how long it took. There was no audit trail. So when they came to us, we looked at their technical landscape, and they had SharePoint, which is another common software you're going to see a lot in our stories. But they had SharePoint for document storage, and they had Microsoft SQL for their database. So they used those in combination. And then they wanted Black Pearl, K2 Black Pearl, one of our products, to design workflow and forms. So ultimately, we made an employee portal access where employees could essentially log in and get the documents and data that they needed, but K2 would know, based on Active Directory or SQL database, what that employee's permissions were. It would show me data based on who I am, what department I am, and what level of seniority I have. So that leads into the results. So number one, they got real-time process tracking and visibility, very important. Number two, the most important one, they got their audit trail, they got full compliance with that audit trail. And then it actually expanded into other departments. K2 can be expanded to other departments and use cases, and now they are actually running on average about 850 processes through K2 monthly. And then lastly, also the employee permissions were enforced. So now they can feel comfortable that sensitive data and documents are being protected based on K2 knowing, does this person have access or not, and also not blocking people from that access. And then finally, story number three is PPG Industries, and this is probably the most powerful one. This is my favorite story. So first of all, they have just under 500,000 SharePoint sites. And anytime someone wanted to make a change to a SharePoint site, i.e. documents or data, they couldn't monitor it because you have 500,000. And then additionally, they also couldn't properly manage 12 million files among 5 regions. Everything was very slow, paper-based, and the approval process was also very delayed. So they came to us, and they had SharePoint on-prem for both data and documents and an ERP that they wanted to connect to. We put Black Pearl in there. They started off with building things like the authorization for capital transaction, made-to-order forms, raw material requisition, which what we're going to go over today. But here are the results, and it's a little bit expanded to what you can see on the screen because I'm going to go a little further with what the results were. They were able, yes, to make custom rules. If I made a change to a SharePoint site, added a document, changed some data, it would automatically trigger some workflows. K2 monitored where all documents went. There are rules you can teach K2 to point documents in certain directions to certain departments based on data that's inputted. We'll go into that. They reuse. That's a huge thing. They made their first form, the ACT form, and they reused pieces of that to build all their other forms so they didn't have to start from scratch. Led to 46,000 users globally. Now, the expansion story is the reason why I like this one. When they originally came to us, they wanted it for the commodity chemicals business. That's just a small department they have. And then a few minutes later, they acquired a small company where they needed to make 22 apps for that company quick. Okay, so we did that. And then a couple months later, finance caught wind of K2, and they heard about the chemicals department using it, and they wanted to make the ACT form, the authorization for capital transaction. And then even further, then QA, quality assurance, learned about it, I think about a month later, and they wanted to build the project management and document management workflows. And then it expanded into environmental health and safety department where they wanted to use it for managed raw materials and composition change orders. And then finally today, I know this is getting a little repetitive, but today the architectural coatings department expanded with K2, and they're using it for consumer refunds and warranty requisitions. So this leads perfectly into the transition to what K2 delivers is anytime someone comes to K2, they always have 1, maybe 2 projects to begin. It's some department that's having some issue with data, with workflow, with costs, something's wrong, and they want K2 to fix it. And that's fine, we will fix it. But what you're going to see is you can expand. The biggest value you're going to find with K2 is when other departments see, let's start with the supply chain department. They made their product development and commercialization form and workflow. of a sudden HR hears about this tool they can make their own apps with. They want to make an employee onboarding app. They want to make a payroll app. Ops wants to do a project management app. It starts to expand. So those departments don't need to go buy their own software. They have a tool that someone can build it for them. Okay, so let's go into K2. What do we deliver? What do we do? So we essentially design and allow people to use 4 things: forms, workflow, data, and insights. Let's start with forms. Forms is the ability to design a web form that enables you to collect data and have certain behaviors of that form showing you things, updating information for you to design to your entire employee base and your customer base. Workflows is the ability to have K2 essentially manage your business processes, assign tasks to humans, assign tasks to systems, manage documents and send them in certain directions, probably one of the most integral pieces of K2. And then data integration. So when you come to us, we're going to want to look at what technical landscape do you have? What legacy systems hold your data? What legacy systems hold your documents? Do you want those to tap into these apps? Because we can do it. And then lastly is your insights. And insights are going to be reports that tell you your audit trails, who did what and when, the efficiencies of your apps. So all in all, forms, workflow, data, and insights, those are the 4 main pillars with K2 that are the deliverables for our customers. So let's start with forms. Forms are designed drag and drop. So a lot of times you have to engineer these forms with code. With us, you don't. And you can make rules, such as I click on one button and it shows up another screen, or it transfers data, or maybe because I'm a manager, I can see documents A, B, and C, but if I'm a director, I can see A through F. So these smart forms are smart enough to know the rules that you have at your organization and to behave accordingly based on either Active Directory, SQL database, or wherever rules you have those stored. Workflows, probably the most popular piece of K2. Being able to design a business process that will assign human tasks and system tasks. So, for example, if I kick off a form for materials requisition, maybe there's I'll say 10 different directions that workflow can go based on the information that I input on that form. Maybe I'm requesting something that's over $50,000, so it's going to go to my VP. Maybe 2 weeks have passed and nothing has happened to the form, and so it escalates somewhere else. These are all conditional rules and triggers that K2 will learn. You'll teach them, and it monitors and takes action on its own, so you do not have to. Okay, smart objects. This is our patented technology that connects your legacy systems to your K2 apps. So looking at above, look for some software that you probably have one of the things above. We don't show all the out-of-the-box ones we have so far, but the Microsoft stack, very big with us that we integrate with. If you have Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, I believe we're even with ADP. We also do have open web service brokers that we can allow you to integrate with your legacy systems. So the idea, though, is you have your data and your systems. We tap into those. You build apps with us. And then I can be in one single form where I can surface all that data up, look at multiple software without logging into different data sources, and push that data out where it goes to its responsive destination. So let's go over an example here, and we have about 2 more minutes, and I'm going to hand it over to Bree. So the example I want to go over is, let's say I have a connection smart object to SharePoint, a list or a library of documents. And I want to make a certain section of a form for my employees to fill out. So what I'll do is, let's say I want to tap into SharePoint, and I want to bring in title, name, and company name for customers I'm talking to when I'm using this form. Well, let's say a week later decide, you know what, we have a CRM, we have Salesforce, and I actually want to change that to pull the Salesforce ID number of that company. So now I'm looking at one single view, tapping into 2 different sources, but the user sees one form and it all looks the same. So when I'm filling out that form, it doesn't feel like I'm looking at Salesforce and SharePoint and SQL. It's one form surfacing up all the data for me to see. I can make my decision and push that data back out if I need to. Last two pieces, insights. Again, this is going to be your audit trails. Being able to visually identify where things are real time. Bree will show you that during the demo. Being able to see the efficiency of your apps. Maybe you build an app that's not working very well. How do you change it? Where is it broken? Where is it slow? Those reports will come out of the box. And these are custom reports too. And then lastly, mobile. I very rarely have talked to a company that does not have some form of mobile strategy. It doesn't have to be the number one priority, but it's there. And we are mobile. We do have an app that you can download. We are mobile responsive. So the idea behind this is I put out a materials requisition request and my boss is out of the office. Does business stop because he's not there? And the idea is no, we do not want it to stop. He's either out of the office, he's at a PTA meeting or on vacation or at a different plant, and he gets a notification and he can approve or deny and business continues. So that's the point of mobile. Okay, so thank you for listening to the stories. Thank you for listening to the value props. I'm going to introduce you to Bree Houston, who's one of our experts here at K2. Bree, are you there? Oh, I have to unmute you.
Hello, everyone, and thank you.
All right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Hopefully they can too. Let me hand
Okay, perfect.
Hold on one second.
Perfect. Thank you. And Alex is going to let me know when you are able to see my screen, hopefully.
We can see your screen.
Perfect. So what we have today for our demo portion of the webinar is a material requisition. So just to set kind of the view as we kind of go along through our demo, we're going to have a material requisition who's submitted by Chad. So Chad is someone who is probably controlling what kind of items get created from our fabrication floor, and we want that material requisition to go through some kind of approval, probably to Chad's manager, who we'll show you after Chad submits his request, in order to make sure that whatever request he's made is going to be valid and should be pushed out to production. And after that, what you'll see in our view flow is that we then go out to SAP and create an entry. So this particular example integrates both on the front end, getting data from SAP, and also creating entries in SAP that you could then go and either manage directly through SAP, or if you wanted to manage through a K2 process, you could also do that. So really powerful tool when it comes to managing your data and how things get created, as well as, like Alex mentioned, some validation. So we'll go through all of that. What you see in front of you here is kind of our dashboard view of our material requisition. So by default, I'm going to show you the work list. And as we go through our example today, this is going to be a really powerful way for our users to interact with tasks that have been assigned to them. So Forms and Workflow in K2 work really closely together to make sure that it's kind of a seamless interaction and experience for your users, and you kind of get data in the correct places at the correct time. So this work list is going to be unique to the user who's logged in. So it's only showing, in this case, Chad's work list items. If I was to switch over here to his manager, who is William, you'll see that right now William doesn't have any work list items. And that's going to change when Chad submits his request. So on this work list here, if I scroll on over, because I'm zoomed in quite close so that you have a good viewing screen, I can go ahead and select this little flyout menu here. And what you'll notice is that on this particular work list item, I have the ability to open the form, which is going to load up that request, and I can add additional details and make the decision attached to this item. And then I can also open up the view flow. So this is going to give me a lifetime view of where my process is at as it's in flight, going from person to person. And then at the bottom here, I have a few different options. So if I wanted to sleep my task and say I'm not going to be ready for it for a few days, I can sleep it and it's going to go ahead and remove it from my work list, and then when I'm ready I can kind of come back around to it. I can also redirect to validated users in the process, or I could even, kind of in the same light, share this task with someone else if I need someone else to maybe have a decision on my particular task. In some cases, this work list is also configured so that a user can action that work list item right from their work list. So a really powerful tool for your user interaction. So let's go ahead and submit a new requisition. So you'll see here, as I load up my requisition, I'm populating the requester information in this requester view by default. So this is information that the user probably shouldn't have to enter in because it's going to be redundant, or we can pull that information and kind of help them with that experience so that they're A, correctly filling in information, and B, not having to fill in information that's kind of redundant. So as I scroll down here, you'll notice that I have a separate view that has my material information. So in this particular request, we have some validations. So if I go and I try to request the material, you're going to see that it highlights everything that's required. As I hover, you're going to see that all these values are required, and my form's not going to let me submit until everything that is included in my request is there. So I'm going to go ahead and select a plant. And again, this is a plant number pulling from SAP. We could certainly display the plant name if that was more desirable for the end user to make it a little bit easier. In this case, we are assuming that there's a plant number that our requester is very familiar with. And then they're going to select a delivery date. So you can see here as I hover over this little info button, it's going to tell me what kind of information is expected. And you'll notice that it says same-day delivery is not allowed. Okay, well, let's go ahead and check that. So if I try to select the same-day delivery, you're going to notice that I get this pop-up message that says, okay, I need to make a different selection. So I need to make sure it is not today. And you can see it clears out that it let me make the. So let's go ahead, we'll put it a week out. And here what I have is actually a lookup to my SAP data. So as I start to type, you can see that my material is limited to things that match what I've typed in. So I'm going to go ahead and select my memory. You can see that the material ID is populated. And now I'm going to go ahead and associate a quantity here. Maybe we want 100, and the price per unit we're going to say is $5.23. And you can see as I tab out that my total price is updated, and I can go ahead and make a selection of the units. So if I wanted the size large, or if it was per each, or a standard size, I could make any of those specifications in my units. And I can add some additional notes. We'll say memory order for our new client, just like so. And then you'll also see as I scroll down, there's also additional kind of details. So if my request is over $2,000, it's going to require that I enter in a comment. In this case, my total price is not over $2,000, so I'll be able to submit this request without a comment. And then I can also go and attach some supporting documents. So you can see here, I can click this, and it's going to allow me to open up my Excel sheet there. We'll say prices and select enter, and you can see it commits that change. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to submit my request. So I'm just going to click the button here at the bottom. You'll notice that I get this nice notification that lets me know, okay, my request has been submitted, and now it's going to go and actually submit my request. So I can go back to my work list. You'll notice that my work list hasn't been updated because there's not an action for me. But I'm going to go now to Chad's manager, William, and we're going to see a little bit different view. So if I go ahead, and it might take a moment for our item to show up, and there it is. So there's our manager review. You can see the activity name, what the folio or reference is to that item, when the task started, and then the workflow name. So on this one, you can see, much different from our other workflow tasks, this manager can go ahead and approve, reject, or request more information right from their work list. In this case, I'm going to open up the view flow in another tab, and what this is going to show us is kind of lifetime rendering of our workflow in flight. So you can see each of the steps that have been completed are going to be highlighted in this green, and the active pathways that have been completed are going to be also highlighted in green. Any task that is kind of in progress or where our workflow is at this point in time is going to be highlighted in this kind of light blue, and then you can see the green and gray. So green lines are pathways that haven't been taken, and the gray steps are ones that are kind of still yet to come. So you can see as we scroll down in our our workflow view flow here. If the reject option is chosen, we're going to go this pathway here and reject the request. And same if finance actually rejects the request, they both go to that same reject notification step. And you can see if the manager chooses to approve the request, but the total price is more than that $2,000 limit, we're going to make sure that it goes to a finance review before we go and approve the request and create it in SAP. So let's go one more step now. Another option for our users to go ahead and interact with their tasks is here in their Outlook. So in this particular workflow and this step, we've configured it so that the assigned user can open the work list item straight from their email, and they could actually action. So if they hit reply and typed any of these actions in their email body, it would actually go and advance that workflow. So for today's demo, let's go ahead and we're going to click right through our email. And what we're going to see is that we have all of the same information about our request. So this is actually now a read-only view. You can see that I can't change any of this information. It's going to be left to what the user submitted. And I can say in my comments, everything looks great, just like so. And then add the comment, and you can see it's going to refresh, add the comment with who it was added by and the date all right for me. And then here at the bottom, I can see the supporting documents. I could go ahead and open that. And then I have my options here. So much like the work list, I have buttons. I can also configure something like a drop-down, but this is all built right into the form to go ahead and interact with the workflow. So let's go ahead and approve this item. And you can see I get another nice notification, everything's been submitted, and we're going to go ahead and close that tab. Now if we go back to Chad's Chad's email, there we go, we're going to see that there we go. So our requisition has been approved, and we now have a referenceable request number. So where this request number comes in handy is as I go over to SAP, I can actually pull up this request and see details in it. So that's what I'm going to do at this point in time. So we're going to take this request number, and you're going to see that down in my SAP list display, I'm going to go ahead and type that in here, and then I'm going to go ahead and execute to find my list of purchase requisitions. And this might take a little time in our SAP example today. But you can see how I'm creating this connection to, oops, and we'll log back into SAP. That seems to be our issue. Just like that. And we'll go to our purchase requisition. We'll try that again and execute. There we go. That looks a little bit better this time and a little bit quicker. We'll go ahead and click on that request, and we can see all of the information about our request. So the quantities and dates, we can see our quantity, that it hasn't been ordered, when our delivery date is, when our request date was, and then any of the other information as we update that order. And we could certainly plug this back into our forms. You can see our plant here is Atlanta from that number that we entered. So really powerful tool when it comes to integrating with those line of business systems. The last piece that we probably want to take a look at is our insights. So if I go down to my dashboard here as Chad, what we're going to see is our workflow instances, in this case our material requisition, and I'm going to go to the one that I just submitted. And as I click through the instances grid, so you can see I clicked the bar graph here and it populated all of the instances that I have for my materials requisition. And then as I click and kind of drill down here, again, I can do things like open the view flow in another tab. And then we can drill down into our workflow data, and this is all by default in our workflow and from the data that's kind of out of the box and ready to go. So you can see that as we start to look at each one of these processes and things that took place in our workflow, we can see where the most time was spent and what each one of those steps looks like. So if we pick something that required a user action. We can see the time it took. And this is where we can start to compare, okay, where are our users spending the most time in our workflows, and where can we maybe get more efficient in our processes? So this is really great, useful information that comes right out of the box and from all the workflow data as your users interact with your process. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Alex to go ahead and wrap up our webinar for today.
Yeah, and Bree, thank you. So we actually have some questions here that, Bree, if you don't mind staying on for a few more minutes, we'll kind of go through. But we have some questions around integrations, so we'll start with that. First question is, so out of the box integrations, you have Microsoft products. What other software do you guys integrate with out of the box? So, Bree, correct me if I'm wrong, we have out of the box SAP, DocuSign, I believe Oracle, and Bree, am I right to say ADP as well?
So SAP, Oracle, there is quite a Salesforce, DocuSign, and then we also have kind of line of business connectors that are a little bit more generic. So most recently we released our REST broker, which if you're familiar with REST APIs and endpoints, it's a way to take those endpoints and with what we call a descriptor file that's created through Swagger, we can describe what that endpoint looks like and connect with it and use all that data. So a really powerful tool, even if we don't provide the standard broker out of the box, we can go and connect to some of those more specialized systems.
Perfect. And then yeah, I think that kind of answers the follow-up question on that one, which is, you know, what, or if you don't have an out-of-the-box connector, how do you make connections into other pieces of legacy software? And I think I touched on it a little bit, which is, you know, we do have open APIs, we do have web service brokers, but maybe, Bree, do you want to touch on that a little bit for those that have legacy systems that want to develop a connector into their own database? How would that be done with K2?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So first of all, it's kind of coming to the conclusion of what kind of endpoint do you have? Do you have a RESTful API? Do you have something like more like a web service? So you have a WSDL file that kind of describes that service and you can connect to it that way. So the more you know about your service, we can decide what kind of broker we need to use to go and connect to that data and what kind of authentication it's going to require. And from there, it's as simple as creating those smart objects. And once that connection is made, you can repurpose those smart objects in any of your processes to make sure that you have these reusable components that are really efficient at connecting to those systems and kind of pushing and pulling data to make sure that kind of all of those systems are integrated together.
Great. Let's see, next question. Can forms, well, we had one earlier also as well, but can forms transfer data from one data source to another, which I think is what we're talking about right now? And then the other piece is, and if you want to touch on this, is can forms run sub-forms or can workflows run sub-workflows? So I think, you know, the theme there is I start a form, start filling out data, and then based on that data, can it trigger a new subsection of that form? And then same thing with the workflow.
Yeah.
If it goes a certain direction, gets approved by someone and then declined by another person, can it trigger a sub-workflow automatically?
Yeah, and that's a lot of questions at once. So let me start at the top of that. That's okay. So kind of the top level of can I take data from one place and put it in another place? And you absolutely can. Not that you want to be using K2 specifically to move all of your data. That's probably where migration is more appropriate. But if you have a form experience where you're pulling maybe some data from CRM and then submitting data back to SAP, you could keep all that information in CRM and store a reference in SAP, or you could create some of that data in SAP that's maybe necessary for your entry. It's definitely kind of up to how you want to build and how you want to kind of repurpose that data through other applications.
Okay. And then
And then the
what? Oh,
second
go ahead.
piece,
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry about that.
so that's okay. So moving in to now the second piece of that question, which was subviews and subforms. So another powerful tool when it comes to creating a good user experience is being able to create a very focused view and form experience, but if additional information is needed or a user needs to maybe edit that entry in CRM for something like an account or a contact, we can do things like populate a subview that will allow you to interact with a subset of the information without leaving that form experience of maybe your material requisition. So you're able to see information about the count right in the same window, make your changes and save, and then proceed with your primary request. So it allows you kind of that flexibility of making sure that you have all the information you need to complete your request without having to start over. And then the last piece was workflows, right? And you might have to refresh my brain on where we were going with that one.
The workflow one was I think it's similar to the form, meaning I start a form and triggers a subform. Can a workflow do the same thing where based on certain decisions or data that's been inputted, can it trigger a child workflow as the parent workflow is running?
Thank you. Yes, and that is again kind of the same thing where your parent workflow, so we call it a parent-child relationship when we have that kind of sub-workflow scenario. So we can have a main workflow that goes and does all of the main parts of our request, and maybe on a certain selection on the form we want to actually go and complete a sub-process, and that process can either run at the same time, so we can kick that process off from the parent, the child runs and the parent still keeps on running and going through all the things it needs to do, or we have the option to say, you know what, we actually want to grab some information from that child workflow and pass it back to our parent. So our parent workflow is going to go ahead and pause and wait for that child workflow to complete, and then it's going to proceed with the rest of the steps that it needs to go through in order to complete the parent workflow.
Well, a couple more questions. Do you have your own user interface design environment?
That's a good question. So our forms are what we call standalone. So you can create, like I showed you, that work desk experience, which is something that comes out of the box. So you can use as is as kind of your launch pad. You could also do something like use SharePoint or CRM or Salesforce as your kind of entry point for your users in order to interact with all of the forms that you've built. So you kind of have a couple of different options as far as how your users are going to interact with those forms.
Okay. And then I think the last three, I think I can take a couple of these myself too. First one, I think we've touched on this a couple of times, but basically the question is asking what kind of conditions and rules are we able to handle in K2? And so for the audience, just to kind of give some light on that, basically what that question is asking is, how many scenarios can you teach K2 based on, data being inputted, based on dates or times being executed? And I don't know, and Bree, again, you can chime in after this as well. I don't know if we have an exact number of how many different scenarios and rules and triggers that we have, but I'll tell you is the library is incredibly extensive. It's pretty large, large enough where we have a search filter where you can say, I want to find a rule that transfers data when XYZ happens. And so you type in data and all these rules come up around data. So that's one of the powers, I would say, more and more some beefier pieces about K2 is you have your processes based on your company and your industry and what are your standards. And it's your job to teach K2 and it's K2's job to learn those rules so that when those scenarios do happen, it's able to execute the proper actions accordingly and not have a human make sure it's happening. Bree, do you want to add anything, or do you think I nailed it?
Yeah. I think it's important to note that even though the library of kind of capabilities is extensive, it's also really easy to work with. With that search functionality, it kind of offers that same drag and drop as the designer, where you can add kind of what you need as you build it. So to give you an example, our rules are comprised of 3 elements. So that is a A trigger is something that kind of kicks off like a button click or a change event on a control. And then we have the ability to use conditions. So say a field value has a certain value, we want, you know, a certain set of rules to action under that. So then we have the set of actions, which are the things that we actually want it to do. So we can do things like transfer data from one control to another. We could show a view. We could disable a control. We could do, we could start our workflow process or start, you know, a small process. And we also have the ability to evaluate that logic, and you saw it kind of in my demo, that we can populate things like a message box to give the user information as they're completing their request, so that they're either giving more information to complete the request or letting them know, hey, you're done with your request, you're free to leave the screen that you're currently in.
Great. And then we have one, excuse me, about DocuSign. We have DocuSign. How does this integrate with K2? So I actually used to work at DocuSign for about 4 years. And they're actually here in Seattle. We're in the Seattle area as well. So we have a strong partnership with them. And if a company is looking to have documents go from paper to being a complete digital process, DocuSign is integral to that process, because everything at the beginning can be digital, filling out that form and PDFing that out. But then the minute you need to get that executed, if you don't have an e-signature product in there, you're going to print that out and you're breaking in the digital process. So what DocSign does is it bridges the gap, and essentially I can fill out my form and all the data in it, and that will auto-populate to the contract itself or whatever you're trying to get signed, and be sent out for signature, so that when it gets sent out, the signer gets on their phone or email, they sign it, and then it can be rerouted. It goes back through K2, and it gets rerouted to the proper destination, like a SharePoint, a Salesforce, wherever you want that document to land. K2 is going to be the vehicle to take it there. So hopefully that answers the question. And then lastly, and I think I can also handle this one as well, and I saw this one come earlier and I wanted to save for last, how much does it cost, and what are the differences between the cloud product and the prem product? So costs, we can take that offline in terms of what your user count is and servers you need. Now, the two products that we have, one's on-prem called K2 Black Pearl, and one is cloud-based, which is K2 Appit. They're different in the sense that K2 Appit is completely contingent and required of SharePoint, whereas K2 Black Pearl, the more mature product, can be completely standalone. It is on-prem, and they have two completely different pricing models. So at the end here, I'll put up an email address, or you guys all have my email if you want to talk further about, possibly looking into purchasing this for your company. Happy to give you some quotes. We have a whole sales team here to show you. So, okay, that I think does it for questions. I'm just looking through one more time. Bree, I'm going to go ahead and take back, if I can figure it out, control. Hold on one second here. Thank you. Okay. And we did Q&A. So this is the last thing we want to talk about, our smart starters. So if you guys do decide that, okay, this is an interesting idea, that we can design our own forms, we can design our own workflows, we can make connectors, it's all really interesting to what we need to do. I would say probably the biggest hurdle people have is, well, how do we do it? How do we even begin? And there is a lot of training, there is a lot of teaching going on. But we have this offering called a Smart Starter, which essentially, I believe, we're up to 31 pre-made apps. No, 50, if I'm looking at my own slide. That'd be nice. 50 apps pretty much ready to use. And these are pre-made from K2. So we took some general use cases like employee onboarding, or POs, or PTO requests, and they have a form and a workflow already pre-made for you. And what happens is if you decided to go with K2, you can deploy one of those, and it'll be ready to go, and you just have to configure who it gets assigned to, names, emails, etc., and that will be your base platform. We've known that for a long time, that giving someone a blank canvas, though it's very nice, they can customize it to anything they want, it can be a little overwhelming. They need a little bit of a template and a little bit of a stencil of knowing where they want to go. So that's what Smart Starters do. Well, we are, I want to say, pretty early. We made some pretty good time here. Nope, I didn't do enough clicks here. They're all Smart Starter stuff. if there are any other questions, and I think I have one more. Okay, nope, I don't think so. We're good. Daniel will reach out to you. But if there are any other questions, first of all, go to SmartStar, the SmartStars URL up top. If there are any questions you have for sales, either email me and I'll direct you to the right person, or email sales@k2.com. We have a whole team here internally ready to talk. Again, I have recorded this. I will send this out probably tomorrow to everyone that attended. Feel free to send it to anyone you want. If you want case studies, if you want just to do a one-on-one discussion with us about your own use case, we're happy to do it. Other than that, Bree, a huge thank you to you for joining us today and helping out. And thank you for everyone to joining the webinar. Really glad with a huge attendance today, and hopefully we'll all get together shortly. So have a good rest of your day, and thanks for joining us.